On Saturday, the 8th of October, it's the start of a Rugby World Cup. As of yesterday, the Black Ferns announced their contracted player list, a number of 29 to prepare and get ready. Taylah Johnson from Sky Sport is our expert commentator and presenter. Taylah, thanks for joining us. You're probably across this group of players better than anybody in New Zealand when you talk about you've commentated so many games, worked on so many parts in and around the game for the women in New Zealand. You think about this group that was announced now, and there's 5 training hubs, all of a sudden professional opportunities to train. Before we talk about maybe their performances last year and where they're going to, how significant is this in terms of a step forward, the next step forward for the game in New Zealand?
Oh, it's huge. You know, a couple of years ago, they announced the first time that they were going to start contracting Black Ferns. And then from there, it's just built with the Farah Palmer Cup, with new teams joining in, like the Hawke's Bay rejoining. And then the Black Ferns obviously going on their tour last year, making that happen under COVID times, which was a feat in itself, really, with a lot of other teams not being able to go anywhere. So at least they got over there. But look, this team's really exciting. Another thing that hasn't really been talked about is that their pay's actually increased. So not only is there a contracted playing group, but they've got higher pay, but also incentives to add on to that pay as well. So top ups, as you might call it. But this team is really exciting. There's a lot of young talent in here. 2 people who picked up contracts who I've been a big fan of since I saw them debut in the Farah Palmer Cup while still at school is Liana Mikaelitu and Maya Kawana-Kalani Ruse. So Mikaelitu, you probably heard that last name, being an Islanders fan, is Marino Mikaelitu's little sister. And man, she turned heads when she debuted for the Hawke's Bay Tui a few years ago. Still at high school, was just collecting players with her as she dove over the line. Moved up to Auckland to study and, is only 19 years old and has a contract with the Black Ferns and made her debut last year. She was awesome. And you also got Maya Kawana-Kalani Ruse, who was the head girl of Tamaki College, also made her debut. I think she was year 11 or year 12 when she made her debut for the Auckland Storm. Now she's got a contract too. So there's a whole lot of youth in the side in that forward pack, which is really exciting. Still a lot of players who've been around for a while, and a couple of these contracts have actually been rollover contracts from 2 years previously as well, which is something to note. But interestingly, they've only named 29 players. Obviously, we've still got the Sevens women to come in. So I think there's going to be a big emphasis put on Super Rugby Aupiki and to see who is in form. You look at that squad, there's only one hooker. There's more wingers than first fives and things like that. So there's definitely spots to play for, that's for sure.
Yeah, they talked about the fact that there's a number of contracts that are going to be up for grabs, and like you say, there's a number of Sevens players who have got Commonwealth Games on their radar as well, the Super Rugby Aupiki, and that's challenging at the moment as well because we don't know a start date for that. But all of this is not just about this contracted players list as it is expanding and getting bigger. This is not a short-term thing, right? This is a long-term thing. This is for the future of the game. Doesn't end after 2022. It carries on. It continues. So this is the start of, I would say, the professional era. I mean, you're talking about the genuine start where players can. And look, it's not anywhere near yet the level that the men are earning, but as the next step. And so now there's a lot of expectations that probably change. All of a sudden, goals and opportunities change as well. And there's an element of pressure in and around that. And do you think in some ways there'll still be an adjustment period in terms of, okay, this is what a full-time professional looks like. You've been asked to train significantly and prepare yourself as a professional athlete, but without the resource, without the support, these 5 hubs that they've got across the country, this is significant in terms of helping these players prepare. But if I was to say to you, the 8th of October is not that far away. Last year, there's no doubt that there were a number of things on the end-of-year tour that were clearly evident where we were significantly behind both England and France. Can we, in the next 6 months, get ourselves to a point on the back of Super Rugby Aupiki, on the back of hopefully some domestic test matches at home or some test matches overseas, prepare ourselves to the point where we've got such a strong legacy. We know how great we have been at the biggest stage. Can this group, plus some additions of some of the Sevens players, can they come together and get themselves in a position to become world champions again?
Yeah, this next 6 months is really going to be telling, isn't it? You're right, it's a transition period because these contracts aren't like the ones before. The women were still working jobs, but now they've increased it that much that, the likes of Eloise Blackwell, who was a teacher, can now just focus on playing rugby. You've got, Chelsea Alley, who also, or Chelsea Semple, I should say now, who's married, Chelsea Semple, who has, can just focus on being a Black Fern. So that is going to be a transition period for everyone. They're not used to actually being full-time athletes, and it's really good that they've got the PD windows in there as well. But, there were actually some players who turned it down, and there needs to be questions asked, why did they turn it down? Is it still not enough money for them to actually focus? When you compare them to the likes of England and France, who are on good salaries and who can afford to give up their jobs, we still have people say no to this opportunity. And for us, that's something we really need to look at. And the other question is, are they saying no because of the pay, or is it no because of other factors? I noted that they're missing one, they've only got one hooker. They're missing Te Kuranata Aringamata, who obviously came out and said that she really struggled with her mental health because of what was happening in the camp. And we do need to still remember that that's an ongoing investigation, and a lot of people raise their eyebrows that the contracts were handed out when the coach is still under investigation, things like that. So there's a whole lot of things at play here. The question is, can the girls do it? I think they can. They're a really big bunch of resilient ladies in there. There's women in here who have come back from having children, someone who's had 3 ACL reconstructions. I look at people like Ariana Baylor, who've worked her butt off to get back into this position, same as Ruahei Demont, and things like that. So they are a resilient bunch, but you're right, the likes of England and France have had so much resources poured into them prior to this year. We've left it too late, to be fair. We've invested so much in the sevens, and that's paid dividends, but we haven't equally invested in the 15s game. So had we invested in the 15s the same time we invested in the sevens, I think the results at last year's end of year tour would have been so much different.
Yeah, and it was clearly evident that we were underdone on the back of not played enough rugby, not enough international competition. As the opposition got stronger and moved away, we got to a point where it was almost like they were playing at a different speed. Surely now, though, this is the opportunity, and we've seen they've already had training camps in the off-season. You talk about some of that uncertainty in and around the last tour, and there was a review processes going on. My understanding is they've already made some adjustment and changes to some of the way they do things, some of the process they are doing, but there's an external review that'll need to go about. But I don't see any changes happening there. I understand there's been a bit of support come out for the coach as well from players. So it's a matter of New Zealand Rugby will go about doing that, but that can't be a distraction right now, is it? There's the fact that these women who have been given this opportunity, who are fighting and scrapping like men do, preparing for their Rugby World Cup, they want to make that squad, right? They want to be part of that team. They want the chance to play a Rugby World Cup at home here in New Zealand, which is going to be really challenging. The first area we looked at last year was it appeared as though, given the lack of rugby, the conditioning and our ability to keep up with the pace of the game was a challenge. Does what they've done right now and over the summer and the work they've done, does that start to alleviate some of those concerns? If by maybe that those test matches in the middle of the year, every player will have had that opportunity to get themselves in the best physical condition they're going to need across a tournament?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with the end of year tour last year was because they didn't play any test matches the year before. We didn't have anyone to compare ourselves with. And, I commentated the Farah Palmer Cup all last year, and I kept thinking, man, the skill level is amazing. And then when I saw them play against, against England and France, it was like, oh man, I was wrong. These women are just, they were incredible. And I think, the issue is they weren't playing at a high enough level, and I think the answer to that is Super Rugby Aupiki. Yes, it's condensed, it's small, but it's still, that next step up. It's the best of the best from our provincial rugby, and that's as close as we're going to get to test match level. So I think the preparations they've done by bringing, the best players that we have across the country into that next level, is going to make a difference, because, for years you only went from the Farah Palmer Cup straight into international level, and, with the men's game, you've got Super Rugby, and that really filters out, the athletes from the others. You look at the Farah Palmer Cup, you've got schoolgirls, you've got mums who are just coming back, you've got people who are in their 40s to people who are 15 years old, and it's a huge range. But now this is where the high performance kicks in.
Yep.
And as much as they like to say that they are high performance programs, they're just not quite up to the level that Super Rugby Aupiki is. So the more time we can spend in those camps and together, the better it's going to be. So look, it's the best that the Black Ferns can do. There's nothing more that the squad can do to prepare themselves other than to play in this Aupiki and have these camps and play against each other, because iron sharpens iron. When you're with the best, you're gonna perform to the best. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it's taken this long to get Aupiki running, and that they didn't play test matches in 2020. But I think now they just have to really focus on what they can control, and that's playing against each other and sharpening each other.
You talk about there's a few contracts we know up for grabs. Are there any surprises for you that aren't in this team? And there's a player like a Charmaine Smith, who understands back playing again, which is great. She's been cleared to play, and she's been in the Black Ferns before. She's a player who I'm sure can have an impact at Super Rugby Aupiki. And are there players that you're looking at going, you know what, I would be surprised they don't play their way into the frame very, very quickly through Super Rugby Aupiki?
Yeah, there's one player in particular that always screams out to me is Joanna Nanwu from the Wellington Pride. She is head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to the Farah Palmer Cup, and it's she's a huge omission from that squad. She covers both Lock and Lucy. She's an incredible athlete, and all her peers will say the same thing. Another big omission is Cara Stellinger. We've got multiple women who were nominees for the Fiel for Amalsili medal who aren't in the squad, and were voted by their peers as being the best. So that's an interesting point there. You did mention Charmaine Smith coming back, and that's probably an area that we did struggle with at the end of year tour was the Type 5. But someone who I'm really hoping to see back is Toka Natua. So she has taken a year off because she's had a baby, and I really hope to see her back. I mean, it's hard to forget her 3 tries scored at a Rugby World Cup final from a front rower. That's unheard of in both the men's and women's games. So I'd really love to see her back, and I guess the delay in the Rugby World Cup has meant that she does have time to come back. So I really hope to see someone like that in the squad again. And yeah, it would be great to see Charmaine Smith back as well, because I think we need to strengthen that Type 5 area. We've only got one hooker in there, and this is the first time she's had a Black Ferns contract. Grace Hopapa Barrett was outstanding for the Waikato, and I'm not being biased because she's from the mighty Waitomo, but man, she was outstanding, and that's another big omission from the squad. So yeah, I'd like to see some players kind of put their hands up to come back like Toka, but yeah, we can only see. But yeah, I'm really devastated for people like Jonah Nanwu and Cara Stellinger, who were just head and shoulders above the rest in that Farah Palmer Cup.
We have to be clear here. This doesn't close the door, right? This doesn't close the door on their opportunities going forward. This is more the fact that players that have identified the fact that they feel as though they want to commit to right now. I'm sure those players you've talked about will understand that, because this is World Cup year. You can play your way into it, and that's what Super Rugby Aupiki is about, right? It's presenting the opportunity over the course of 4 weeks for you to go out in a month-long pressure environment to go out and perform. And then particularly in sense of a final, and people say, well, there's only 4 teams, but there's a different pressure that comes with that, the ability to perform under that sort of pressure. So you, given what you know and what you've seen, and you're saying you hope, are you confident that come this Rugby World Cup, let's say it kicks off on the 8th of October, that one, we have the talent, you've talked about the skill level you saw over that, but we can quickly pull that together, get enough of the cohesion that by the end of that tournament, we are well and truly a player and a contender?
I think 2 words stick out for me there: talent and cohesion. No doubt that we've got the talent. It's the cohesion that's the biggest issue, because they haven't spent time playing with each other. As I said, the Farah Palmer Cup, there's 11 different teams. And now that they're only going to be playing in 4 teams, you're going to start building those connections. And it's not until they actually come together as the Black Ferns camp and start building on those connections will we know. So I've got all the confidence in the world that we've got the talent, but we need to get I guess the system right in the Black Ferns. You know, as you said, that's still a work in progress, and they're going to make changes. But yeah, it's the connections both on and off the field that are really going to make the difference here.
Lastly, I can't leave this podcast without asking you, because you've got dual roles. You're working with Moana Pacifica right now, and you've been stuck in your own little room down in Queenstown. Could there be a worse place in the world to be stuck in your room? In fact, you told us before we came on air, is that you've got windows with a view, but obviously you can't open the windows. You haven't had fresh air. Do you get the sense there's freedom coming for you soon?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, these new government restrictions hopefully should be out in a couple of days. But yeah, I'm actually overlooking the Remarkables now as I'm talking to you, and it's really hard when it's been beautiful weather down here, but I can't go outside and breathe the fresh air. But no, it's I've been in worse places, that's for sure. Yeah,
well, you might get out just in time to watch the Highlanders get beaten by the Chiefs. That's all I'm going to say. That's how I'll finish off the pod, Taylah. Hey, thanks for talking to you. We're going to talk to you through the year if you're available, because we know how big a year this is for the game in New Zealand and as well across the globe. Rugby World Cup, that's in October. Thanks, Taylah. Look after yourself. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks, Jeff.